Also, a global exchange exclusive from the Eurozone to the Arab Spring. Saudi billionaire investor Prince Alwaleed Bin Talal talks to us about how he's navigated the global crisis. And moving on, though, one of the world's most prominent businessmen is talking exclusively to CNN, sharing his thoughts with us on everything from the European debt crisis to the Arab Spring. His name is Alwaleed Bin Talal. Let's go over to John Defterios, who caught up with the iconic Saudi billionaire in Riyadh at the Global Competitiveness Forum, and he joins us now live from there. John, first up, what did he have to say? He's been a tremendously successful investor. Just goes to show emerging markets can ride out the storm, especially if you're on the scale of Alwaleed Bin Talal.
Yeah, in fact, Nina, there's been some questions about whether he's still above $20 billion or not because of the turbulence we've seen in the markets. We're in day 2 of the Global Competitiveness Forum, the so-called sand to snow excursion from Riyadh, and 50 executives going from here in Riyadh going to Davos. And today the focus was on global risks, everything from Iran to the European debt crisis, even the U.S. primaries, and some of the stern words that Newt Gingrich had for Saudi Arabia and the kingdom here and the dependency on oil. That raised a few eyebrows here. I raised these issues with Prince Alwaleed Bin Talal and many, many more during our exclusive interview. Here in one of the most prominent towers in the Saudi capital, named after his investment group, sits one of the world's leading investors. 26th on Forbes' list of wealthiest people and the Middle East's wealthiest man, Prince Alwaleed Bin Talal bin Abdulaziz Al Saud has also made his name on Wall Street and beyond. Al-Waleed's $550 million investment into the embattled Citibank in the early 1990s made him a billionaire and a global player. Since then, he has maintained high-profile stakes in Apple, News Corp, and even CNN's parent company, Time Warner, amongst other investments in the real estate, media, and hotel sector. But most recently, Al-Waleed has made headlines with a $300 million stake in the social media site Twitter, and his announcement to launch a 24-hour Arabic news channel, Al Arab, later this year from Bahrain. I caught up with Prince Alwaleed at his office in the Saudi capital. What are your thoughts about the European debt crisis, though? Is it going to create a slow growth environment for another decade because of the debt load and the lack of restructuring, particularly into Southern Europe and Ireland?
Well, no doubt what's happening in Europe is Europe now is paying the dues and paying the fees of they're going across the board in their finances. But clearly what's happening now in Europe in general, clearly Europe has to get out of this debt crisis. It's going to take some time. No doubt this will put a lid on the growth for next at least 4 to 5 years. And depending on how strong they are in getting out of this debt problem that they have right now, this will depend on the strong leadership that the 17 countries in the euro currency, that decision that they will take. But I think this will dampen growth for at least, I would say, half a decade.
And you're not a buyer of European debt through the EFSF facility. You're not attracted to the euro, not attracted to the debt. You think it's too much risk?
No, we're not going to get into that. It's too much headaches, too much problems, too much uncertainties. And the world has a lot of opportunities to look at that are a lot more clearer, and the path forward is more established than really getting into that really quagmire.
Would you suggest the same in America right now? Are you pulling assets out of the United States? Do you have the same concerns about the U.S. debt crisis?
No, look, I always said that, unfortunately, that the United States on one side of the Atlantic, and Europe on the other side of the Atlantic, they're competing who's worse. They're competing who has worse economy, frankly speaking. But after the election, I believe the United States has to take very tough and rough decisions to reduce its cumulative debt that's reaching now almost 100% of its GDP.
Does that undermine its position as the reserve currency, though? You've seen the deals that China's doing with individual countries now to trade in the renminbi.
I think for the foreseeable future, no doubt the United States will remain, and the dollar will remain as the main currency of the world, no doubt about that. Having said that, we have to accept the fact that eventually China will be forced to be reckoned with, and its currency will be stronger as days go by. But also remember that China also has its own problems. Clearly they have more than $3 trillion of foreign reserves. The economy is doing well, growing at 7-8%, sometimes 9%. But also China has a lot of potential social problems also. If you know, all the growth is happening in the east coast of China. But the more you go towards the west, things there deteriorate substantially, and the GDP per capita there reaches $200 to $300, which is really not what China wants.
Let's see if we can clear something up with regards to CITIGROUP, as it's known today. You've been a long-term investor, but because of its being hampered by the U.S. debt crisis, how much damage has it done to the overall holdings? I've read pieces that suggest that your $21 billion empire is closer to 10. Can you clear up where we are today as a result of the CITIGROUP damage?
No, really. Look, we have been living with CITIGROUP since 1991, with all its ups and downs. Clearly, CITIGROUP went through a major crisis, but I believe right now with Vikram's leadership, the worst is over for CITIGROUP, and I believe that CITIGROUP is going to begin paying dividends in 2012, if not begin a share buyback program. So really, CITIGROUP is a big force to be reckoned with, and it's the only bank right now who's global. You will see that the best days of CITIGROUP are yet to come.
Prince Alwaleed lending his support, Nina, to Vikram Pandit and CITIGROUP. It was interesting when we said, are you going to dispose of some of the holdings you've had for so long? He says, my investments are very much like a Catholic marriage. I'm in for the long term. We do not divorce ourselves. He says that about CITIGROUP, even Time Warner, the parent company of CNN, News Corp, and Apple Computer, which he thinks is going to have a long run even after the passing of Steve Jobs, of course, in the past year.
He's certainly a huge investor there in the media space, as well as you were saying, the financial space. And seems, John, he's had nerves of steel to ride through the global financial crisis. Many thanks for that. There, John Defterios joining us from Saudi Arabia. Let's take a look at what Alwaleed Bin Talal owns. Now, 2011 marked a year of investment for this prince and his company. If we just take a look at the few developments over the course of the last few months, first of all, what we saw was Kingdom Holding, his company, announcing plans, as John touched on in his piece before, to build the world's largest tower, reaching no less than 1 kilometre high into the sky. That particular tower will be built in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah. Then, in September, as John was mentioning in his piece as well, Prince Alwaleed Bin Talal decided to go before the cameras, announcing that he's going to be launching his own news service. Al Arab TV is a new project between Kingdom Holding and also Bloomberg News Agency. It's set to hit the air in December, and that was him at the press conference then. Last month, Bin Talal also and his company decided to enter the world of micro-blogging. We're talking about Twitter here. He bought a $300 million stake in that social networking site, and that, of course, grabbed the headlines then. And most recently, the prince announced a $50 million investment in an energy firm in Nigeria. The revolution that took place in Egypt and across other parts of the Arab world hit Egypt's economy hard, but it also had an effect on business for Kingdom Holding. This is the company, I should say, controlled by the Saudi Prince Alwaleed Bin Talal. Let's go back to John Defterios in Riyadh for more on that exclusive interview he granted to John. John.
Thanks very much, Nina. In fact, a year ago, we were at the Global Competitiveness Forum here in Riyadh. The uprisings in Egypt were just starting to unfold, and now we know, a year into it, how far and wide the implications are. As you suggested, it's starting to bite into Kingdom Holdings. In their fourth quarter, revenues and profits were down 20%, in large part because tourism has dropped. He owns the properties, of course, of the Four Seasons, the Movenpick, and Raffles throughout the region, and we've seen a sharp drop. But something very interesting here during our interview, he says this may be the economic turning point, not the political turning point, but the economic turning point of the Arab Spring. Let's take a listen.
Tourism. But I can really confirm that we've seen the bottom of it in 2011. And right now we're already seeing indications that as 2012 commences, we are seeing an improvement in the tourism industry in our region here.
The change in governments we've seen in Libya, Tunisia, Egypt, Morocco, the rise of the Islamic governments, can they be business friendly in the region? What do you make of the change politically?
See, we're getting into uncharted territory. We cannot really judge where they're heading, because we are seeing still now in Egypt and Libya, we're still seeing a lot of the aftermath of the revolutions. Although some early indications in Tunis show that the stability and going back to normal life is beginning to happen. But really, we cannot judge this too early. Some revolutions may take 20, 30, 40 years. We hope that's not the case in our region. We hope that we reach stability and tranquility and things go back to normal as quickly as possible.
So we don't know if it's a pro-business environment or not with the rise of the Islamic parties that have scored extremely well in parliamentary elections.
There's no doubt that the Islamic path or the Islamic factor is beginning to play a role right now. Now, I believe that they have no choice but to be more friendly. because they would like to continue to be to be ruling their countries. To continue that, they know that they have to work on the economy and employment and benefit their people. But right now, I think a form of capitalism, a new form of capitalism with mix of Islamic tilt, something that you have to live with in the coming years to come.
Closer to home, on domestic policy, a very direct question about King Abdullah as a reformer. Will the reforms outlive him eventually?
Those countries in the Arab world, no matter what they are, monarchies or republics or emirates, those that did not get the revolutions, they should at least get the message of the revolution or the messages of the revolution. And they need to not only change and make reforms at the financial or at the social level, but they have to do it at the political level also. It's very important because the masses right now are seeing all what's happening around them. And I believe that there's no choice but for Saudi Arabia and whomever may succeed King Abdullah, God forbid, after he lives long, that they have to go the reform path and translate that into political reforms in our region.
A year ago, there was a belief here in the royal court that there was not a consensus to take military action. A year later, it seems to be an inevitable move here to keep Iran boxed in with sanctions and to not try to block the Straits of Hormuz.
I don't believe war is inevitable between Iran and the United States or between Iran and the rest of the world. And I don't believe the Hormuz Strait will ever be closed because Iran knows this is suicide. Plus, Iran knows very well what happened next door to it, to its west. We know what happened to Saddam Hussein and Iraq. So this is still very vivid in their mind. I believe that the United States engage with Iran, talk to them, and see what you can do with them. I think they want recognition.
It was interesting, in an interview on this program just over a week ago, the oil minister, Mr. Naimi, said that Saudi Arabia will, in fact, provide up to 2.5 million barrels a day to protect the energy market. Is that a wise move? The Iranians have suggested that the kingdom should rethink that strategy.
This is not only wise, this is a very political and strategic phrase from our oil minister, who reflects really the views of King Abdullah. For Saudi Arabia to come public and say we flush as much oil as needed to compensate for any potential loss of the Iranian oil, that's a big message to Iran that, don't keep threatening the world economies with the close of Hormuz, because we will, if push comes to shove and we need to raise our oil production, we'll compensate for all that you have. That's a big message for the market also, that we will maintain the $100 that really seems to be good for the consumers and good for the producer.
Once again, Prince Alwaleed supporting the kingdom's position here to provide more oil to the market. I also thought it was quite interesting, Nina, that he was suggesting that confrontation can be avoided if Iran gets recognition. You can bring them back to the bargaining table. This is what the business community is indeed looking for. Also, I spoke to another Saudi royal today who was suggesting that the kingdom does not support unilateral sanctions like we're seeing within the European Union or the United States right now against the Central Bank of Iran, but they would support UN sanctions. But they suggested that the Security Council needs to move with greater urgency, particularly with regards to Iran and to Syria. Back to you.
And in the meantime, the rest of the world is hoping that Saudi Arabia will make up the shortfall of those Iranian oil sanctions. John Defterios, we thank you, and also bon voyage, because John Defterios is a very busy man these days. He's off next to Davos for the World Economic Forum. Now, speaking of Kingdom Holdings, let's have a look at its performance, because it took quite a hit in the fourth quarter of the year, down about 20%. But for the year, income was up nearly 6%. And Prince Alwaleed says that his company is optimistic about 2012. If we take a look at the company's total share performance here, as you can see on the chart, Kingdom Holding saw some highs and some lows at the beginning of 2011. Take a look at exactly that particular trend, in particular this peak to trough activity for the month of March. As you can see, the company began to climb again just last month, around about here between December and January, and it has continued right up until the first of this particular year. So it's gone right up from where it started, and as we were saying, it had a pretty choppy time during the month of March, but then again, so did everybody. You're watching Global Exchange. Still to come.